Okay, thank you. I hereby call to order this meeting of the Arizona Boxing and Mixed Martial Arts Commission. Today is Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. The time is 10 a.m. Would those commissioners that are in attendance please identify themselves and state as to whether they are here via Google Meets or a phone call?
This is Joe Pennington. I'm participating via Google Meets.
And I am Scott Fletcher. I am calling in via telephone. Commissioner Feinstein is not going to join us today.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Let's move to B, our old business. B1 is the COVID-19 protocols, vaccinations, and individuals with antibodies. Dr. Ken Oda. Dr. Oda, how are you this morning?
Doing well. Thank you very much. Pleasure to meet with you guys again. You just called me doctor. It reminds me of when I was in college. We had this math professor that had a double PhD, and this student got really annoyed with her and out of like sarcasm called her doctor because she kept she would make a point every morning to kind of go through her resume. And anyway, sorry, I digress. Yes. So with regard to COVID antibodies testing, not really sure where to begin with this because I can definitely go on a soapbox, but I know.
Hey, Dr. Oda?
Yes.
Can I interrupt you real quick? So, so what I've asked, commissioners, is for Dr. Oda to, there's obviously been some changes. When we wrote our COVID protocols, we wrote them in May of 2020, and obviously COVID was very new to the world at that time, only about 90 days in or so. So we wrote it with the information we had at that time. And then the commission obviously passed those COVID protocols in October of 2020. Since then, there has been significant medical research and updates as to what's best and what's safest. And some of those changes affect or may affect the current protocols we have in place. Those considerations are individuals that are vaccinated, should they continue to be tested for COVID? And is there anything that because of their vaccination that they would be precluded or be exempt from in our COVID protocols? And the other part of that is individuals such as myself that have already had COVID and do have antibodies. Is there any consideration that we should change our protocols to exempt individuals that can prove that they have antibodies? And then if that's the case, at what threshold do we develop? You have X amount of antibodies, and that shows us or tells us that you are safe and immune. So that's what I've asked Dr. Oda to kind of explain to us of whether or not we should change our protocols with those two considerations in mind. And if so, what threshold do we use? So Dr. Oda, if you could speak to that, please.
Sure. So recently I gave a talk to I believe they're called the Arizona Assisted Living Association. And the reason they asked me to talk to the group was because I guess a lot of these assisted living homeowners are they're apprehensive to take patients that have had COVID into their homes for, I guess, just a misunderstanding that if these folks that have had COVID, they come into their home, now there's more of a risk of them getting a reinfection. And that, if you look at the literature that has come out of China, that has come out of Italy, as you know, these are areas where they were hit very hard with COVID. There are these not large scale, but I would say semi-large, where they've done observational studies where they've followed these patients that were discharged from the hospital with COVID. And this was before the vaccine was available. And they concluded in these studies a couple of things. Number one is that the majority of the patients that were discharged, they had evidence to some degree of antibodies to SARS-CoV-2. The second thing that they found was that none of them were reinfected. And so what this would suggest is that if you have recovered from COVID, yes, we have these variants that are out there that we still don't know that much about, but there is some pretty good data that suggests that if you are vaccinated, you have a very good chance of being immune to these variants as well. So with all that said, especially with some of the changes that the CDC has made to how folks that are vaccinated can sort of re-enter society, if you will, I think it's definitely worth a conversation to think about how is it that we can modify how it is that we proceed with events. And one of the things that I'd like to propose, because it's low-hanging fruit, and now that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is out, I think we're going to start seeing more places popping up that are going to make the vaccine available to the rest of the public, is that if one is vaccinated and they can show proof, then at least from a event perspective, I would support the notion that those folks can be exempt from being tested. I guess one of the things that could be called into question is that if one is vaccinated, could they be a carrier? And unfortunately, there isn't obviously there isn't that much data yet to answer that question. But from the studies that I've been reviewing, I think things are looking up, and especially with the fact that here in Arizona, the case counts are going down. Hospital capacities are increasing. In other words, vent usage, hospitalization for COVID are going down. I think we're in a place where the actual prevalence of disease is declining pretty rapidly. And when the prevalence of disease is low, I think the intensity by which we're doing screenings can also be adjusted.
Very good. Thank you, Doctor. I got a couple questions, if I may. I don't know if we've gotten enough time with COVID to sort this out, but what are your thoughts, if any, about how long a vaccination is good for, or how long antibodies are good for, as far as time frame is concerned?
Yeah. Nobody can answer that question definitively, but I can tell you from my experience just in my own personal clinic, and these studies that have looked at SARS-CoV-2 antibodies from Italy and China, you're looking at anywhere from 2 to 6 months. And the reason why I use that range is only because they were unable to carry out the study longer. So case report, just myself. So I had COVID-19 back in the summer of 2020. And there was a lot of talk back then about how these antibodies could only last maybe up to 3 months. And certainly with something novel that we haven't really seen before in this magnitude, I mean, it's fair to have that type of caution. But we are now, let's see, March. I'm not that great at math, but we are at March. I just recently tested myself, and my titers are still really high from that infection. Interestingly enough, I'm sitting here in the parking lot of Page Family Practice, where I'm going to receive my second Moderna vaccine. But that's just more for, to set an example and actually see like how do I respond to this vaccine. So yeah, from the studies, it shows anywhere between 2 to 6 months, but that's only because of the duration of the study. And in each of those studies, what they showed was all the way out to the end of the study, all these patients were still, they still had antibodies to various degrees.
Understood. That's highly encouraging. And yet it's an unfair question. I know with time we'll get our hands around this a little bit better. Commissioner Pennington, thoughts, questions?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I do have one question for Dr. Oda. Currently, we use a very stringent antibody test, fairly expensive antibody test. Is there anything that is available that is good enough for us to use as an antibody test that would help reduce the cost to the fighters and the promoters?
There are numerous how shall I say this? There are numerous point of care antibody tests that are available that are less expensive than what you would pay for from a serum sample. Now, I don't know if things are changing, but I have tested myself now several times, and I have not received one bill from my insurance company. Now, with that said, they're jacking up my premiums, I'm assuming because of all the costs they've been eating this past year. But there is that. There are these point of care tests that initially, like back when the pandemic started, we were actually using it. And I did a head-to-head small scale study in my own clinic where I compared serum antibody tests to these point of care ones. And sure enough, there was a discrepancy. So where the serum test would tell you it's positive, the point of care test would tell you that it's negative. Now, if somebody, let's just say, had COVID, they tested positive, they have the results, and then this point of care test comes back negative, but they know they just recently had it, but they need proof that they have some form of immunity, then they would have to go get the serum test. And if that one's negative, then okay, well, you no longer have antibodies. So simple answer to your question, yes, those tests are available. You would be in a place where if the result came back negative and you were using that test to know whether or not you had to be tested or not be allowed entrance into an event, let's say, then you would have to go get another test. Whereas if that test came back positive, like and you wanted to show proof, then that would be the way to do it. Very easy and cost effective.
Hey, Dr. Oda, with the antibody test, if we accept one of the FDA approved antibody tests, is there a quantitative value that we should be establishing as a threshold? You talk about the titer, is it titer
Yes.
levels?
Correct.
Titer levels.
Titer.
So is what would be or are you able to give us a recommendation of X value? Anyone above that should be considered exempt. Is there a value that we should be looking for?
Well, so it's tough for me to just give you an answer that would apply to a population, but what I can tell you are a couple of things. One is that, for example, I send a lot of my labs samples to LabCorp, and their cutoff is 0.8, meaning that if your value comes back 0.8 or less, it means you have very low antibody titer or you have none at all. Mine, and along with other patients that I have tested recently, more as an academic interest, not so much that they needed to know because they were getting the vaccine anyway. These titers consistently come back at greater than 250. So I would, the way that I would say it is if, based on the laboratory standard, if you're above 0.8, which I haven't seen anybody with like 1 or 5. I haven't seen any result like that. The titers have been just astronomical. Then I would say that, in my opinion, should serve as a way that if you are, let's say, somebody who did not want to be vaccinated, and there are plenty of folks out there like that, I would say that your antibody titer should be above 0.8.
Would you support a recommendation to, if that's LabCorp's reporting or determination for the commission, and because of what we do in the sports we regulate and the close contact, would you support if the commission established a slightly higher level of just one or greater, or do you think 0.8 is a sufficient a threshold?
Ooh, tough question for me to answer. However, I would support a titer that, if let's just say we arbitrarily made it high, because I'm confident that if you were to test folks that have had COVID and you were to test their titer, at least in this time period, right? I can't suggest for, let's say, 2022, but at least within this year, if they've had in the past year, their titer is going to be high, just from what I've experienced. It's really tough for me to say that, well, definitively, this is the answer, just because I don't think anybody can really say that they're an expert in that, since we've only been in this situation for only so long. But yes, if we chose a number that was, let's just say, for argument's sake, significantly over 0.8, then yes, personally, I would say I would support that as a way to exempt someone from screening.
Okay. And then I have a question on the vaccinations. If we wait after the second shot for Moderna, Pfizer, or in the case of Johnson & Johnson, the one shot, how many days or weeks should it be after they've had that either second dose or that Johnson & Johnson dose before they would be considered safe to or vaccinated?
Ooh, so that's a really good question. There is some not controversy, but what they're questioning now is, does the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, do you actually need two? That's a question that has been brought up, and I think both Pfizer and Moderna now are they're trialing what it would look like if you were to just get one vaccine as opposed to two. Now, I believe that period of time to wait until you build up the immunity is about 1 month. So at this time, I would say if you had the Johnson & Johnson, you would wait 1 month, and you should have significant immunological response to be considered immune for whatever the duration that vaccine will work.
Okay.
And then same thing for the Moderna and Pfizer, even though there is this thinking that the first injection does the job. I would say, because we don't know yet, then it would have to be 1 month after the second shot.
Okay. Commissioners, did you guys have any other questions?
By the way, I can see that changing in the future.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna make a recommendation to the commission that I think we need to either revisit the COVID protocols every so frequently, maybe every 180 days or so, because so much information is constantly changing. That may be a good direction that the commission reevaluates every so often, so that we continue to make sure we have the latest and updated information.
Okay.
I agree.
Let me add one more thing to this.
Sure.
Which is that in these studies, I believe I think it was the China studies, maybe even the Italy, I can't remember now, but one or both of the studies that I reviewed, what they showed was that these folks that they followed, and there were hundreds, okay, that were hospitalized and discharged, none of them had a reinfection syndrome. However, up to about, I believe, 20% continued to test positive for SARS-CoV-2 via either nasal swab or in their stool. I'm not sure why China uses the stool sample, but that's just what they did in this study. So, and what the thinking is that, well, if you're if you don't get reinfected, it's plausible that we're not talking about live or virus that can infect. Rather, it's just picking up remnants of genetic material from the virus that's just hanging around.
Interesting.
But I think what's important to take from that is that these hundreds in each study that they followed within between a 2 to 6 month period, none of them got reinfected. You will find, however, you get onto PubMed, you will find these case reports of patients, okay, the onesies, twosies, where you will find that someone had COVID, and then a few months later, they actually did have a reinfection. So the thinking is that, well, it's this kind of thing is extremely rare. It's plausible, but it is extremely rare from what we've seen. That has been the data that has been published.
So would you, because of the information is still changing, would you recommend that the commission make a change to the protocols based on the information we just talked about, vaccinations, but hold off on antibodies until we can do a little further research and develop a kind of a threshold? Would you support that, or do you think we should go ahead?
I think vaccination, proof of vaccination, is the lowest hanging fruit and the easiest. Maybe if we were to go step by step, that would be the easiest first step. And then the second being antibody titers.
Okay.
And I think that, well, of course, the mask situation is still quite the controversy, but I would think that maybe that would be the third thing to look at.
Okay. I know you got to get going. I don't know if the commissioners have any other questions for you. We still have some more things to talk about in this bullet point, but I want to see if they have any other questions for you, I think, before you have to get going.
I still have 5, 10, 15. I still have about 15 minutes.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay.
Hey, Dr. Oda, thank you so much. And we need your guidance going forward. It's all encouraging. I think it's encouraging for society. Our business is maybe a little bit trickier in that we're putting on combat sports events, hopefully with live crowds at some point. So your guidance would be critical going forward. Say, if you have 15 minutes, we're about to talk about cannabis and THC levels. Do you have any comfort level with chatting with us about that?
I think from a general standpoint, sure. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate your time, and why don't we table B2 and B3? We'll come back to that and go to C1, which is legalization of cannabis. Mr. Meneses, will you open us up?
Yes, sir. If real quick, if I can just say, if we can also go back to B1, I have one more, not right now, but I have something else to add. We don't need Dr. Oda for that, but I do have something I want to go back to that. Okay. But we can jump into C1. The legalization of cannabis. So Commissioner Pennington had asked that we definitely start exploring and looking into how the legalization of cannabis here in Arizona, both recreationally and medically, and as well it's becoming more accepted and adopted nationally, how that should affect the commission's stance. So I was doing some research and looking at this. Our rules already state that we are to follow the WADA standards, the World Anti-Doping Association standards, and they are the organization that oversees Olympic sports, and they have not differed from their stance so far on marijuana being or THC being prohibited in competition. However, interestingly timed, yesterday the ABC Medical Advisory Committee released a statement regarding cannabis, and I would like to share my screen to share this with you. Let's see real quick. I don't know. How do you share just that one window? Ah, here we go. Let's see. All right, can you see my screen? Hold on, having a little bit of trouble. All right, well, it's not, I'm having trouble loading it, so I'll just kind of go over it with you real quick. As of yesterday, the ABC, the Association of Boxing Commissions and Combative Sports Medical Advisory Committee, issued the following statement and recommendations to both state and, oh, Carlo got it. Can you scroll down a little bit? This is a recommendation to both state and tribal commissions that we adopt the following policy regarding athletes who test positive for THC over 150 nanograms, which is the approved WADA level. It then goes on to talk about an athlete's first positive THC test over 150 nanograms should be a fine of $100. Their second violation should be a fine of $100 plus the estimated cost of the test, which is almost $300. And then it says the commission should use their own discretion when issuing fines for repeat offenders, such as doubling or tripling the fine of $100 plus the cost of the test. If able, commissions could also require multiple offenders to enroll in a drug addiction treatment or counseling. It says at the bottom that the ABC does not recommend or support overturning an athlete's win if the athlete tests positive for THC over 150 nanograms, nor the suspension of an athlete that tests positive over 150. It is not the committee has determined in association with the ARP that this is not a performance enhancing drug. It is a performance suppressor, and athletes who test positive should not be punished in the same manner as an athlete who tests positive for a performance enhancing drug, a PED. You can go ahead and stop sharing that. So I support this. I looked at this. This is kind of the information I was going to talk to the commission about anyways. After Mr. Pennington had asked that we look at this, we have already kind of started establishing a very similar policy on issuing fines for THC violations. The one thing that I would disagree with on the ABC recommendation is on the WADA site, they do establish 150 as the minimum threshold for reporting. However, they went a little higher with the decision limit of 180. So at 180 nanograms, WADA recommends that is a confirmed, for sure, positive THC violation. And I would just recommend moving up to the decision limit. So actually going up a little higher than what the ABC is recommending. They're going with the bare minimum of 150. I think the Arizona Commission should, especially considering that both recreational and medicinal are legal here. And we are also talking about only restrictions to in competition. So from the minute they've signed their bout agreement until the completion of their bout, they would be prohibited from having over 180 nanograms of THC in their system should they be tested. That would be my recommendation. And I don't know if Dr. Oda has any comments on that.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. I would say that the numbers, just in my mind, I guess you would have to set some kind of limit. I think that makes sense. For me, it's hard to suggest what value absolutely would be considered harmful, or that should require some sort of punitive thing. But I also agree that from a performance enhancement standpoint, it is a suppressant. From a medical standpoint, the kinds of things that I see with respect to THC is more so toxicity, and I think the symptoms that people have from the toxicity of it can happen at different levels. So in my mind, it's more of a safety issue as opposed to an unfair advantage issue, if that makes sense. Right. So like, for example, you know, just like blood pressure, right? We just, with some of the folks from the ARP, we just finished writing this manuscript on blood pressure screening in combat athletes prior to the event. And it's not so much that the blood pressure itself at that moment is would be a problem, although it could be. It's more so for the long-term safety of the athlete, you know, for us to know that they're headed in a they're on a path of poor health that could result in morbidity or mortality in the near future. And this is something where, even though it's not necessarily mortality, what we're seeing now, especially with this notion that marijuana is natural, it's healthy, it can't harm you. Well, now that we have these different formulations and concentrations are going up, it certainly can, because I've seen it in my own clinic. It can cause harm. So for me, it's more of like from a safety standpoint, that if somebody's is on that much, there's a problem.
Sure. So that would be,
doctor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, one question. Critical to us is keeping impaired fighters out of the ring or the cage, be it alcohol, other drugs, or THC. My understanding is that these THC tests can look back a couple weeks. It's not like a blood alcohol test that can tell if you're impaired immediately. Am I correct in that? I've been told by a few people that these THC does not clear the system for a long period of time. So while you may test positive right now, you may have ingested THC a couple weeks ago. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So here's an example for you. I recently, over the past few months, I've been treating this 29-year-old who didn't believe me at first, but he was going through THC withdrawal syndrome, cannabis withdrawal. And for some, it's just torture. And so we made a pact that he would not relapse. And so I had, family members and such watching him. And despite the fact that he has not been touching cannabis at all, his levels very slowly came down with a urine drug screen as the test. And it took just a little over a month for it to actually show up as 0.
But do you remember how long it took to get to 180 though, Doc? 150?
That I don't know, because this guy, he was as I would suspect that some of these fighters might be, this guy was an everyday smoker multiple times a day before he quit. So I would imagine that someone like that can get, especially with these new formulations, you can get levels up high pretty quickly.
Sure. So commissioners, there was the courts are also in kind of the same boat of trying to figure out how to establish, for DUI law, how to establish what level is impairment. And as you mentioned, Chairman Fletcher, it can stay in your system for several weeks. THC is fat soluble. The more fat we have on our body, the more it stores in there, and it takes longer to burn off and to metabolize. This study that the courts have recently come out with talks about the metabolization and how long it takes for someone who is a chronic or everyday user to essentially reach this threshold. And from what I've read on the research that's been on this this research paper that the courts have put together, it varies for each person. Obviously, as kind of Dr. Oda has said, but it's really they're estimating about a week would get someone down to the threshold. So if we're talking about an in-competition violation, if someone's fighting, for instance, this Saturday on Rough, theoretically, if they're an everyday user of THC or cannabis, and they are not carrying a bunch of storage for the THC, then this study is showing about a week or so would remove or put them under that threshold, and alleviate some of that concern of being impaired at the time of the contest.
Thank you. Commissioner Pennington, your thoughts?
Just a question for Dr. Oda. Regarding the THC, which I think is the psychoactive portion of the cannabis strain.
Correct.
Whenever they do the testing, is it measuring actually THC or one of the metabolites after the body and the liver has processed that stuff?
Oh, gosh, good question. I will have to get back to you on that.
Part of the reason for asking that is if it is measuring THC and the person has some psychoactive medication on board or THC, that to me would seem to be one thing. But if it is CBD, which is another one of the products of the plant, does the test distinguish between CBD and THC?
Well, I believe it. No, that I believe it does, because the report actually comes out mentioning THC in the chemical that it's testing for. However, you raise a question that I don't want to give you a wrong answer to. So I'm going to confer with a friend of mine who's a toxicologist, and I can get that answer promptly.
Great, thank you. If you would just run that back through Mr. Meneses so he can send it out to us.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Meneses, your hope is that we adopt the ABC's recommendations today?
Yeah, essentially, we've already adopted it. We've already established in the past that 150 nanograms of THC or greater is a violation. I'm simply saying adopt the ABC's recommendation for a progressive discipline or fine imposed for violations, but also raising that threshold from 150 to 180, because that is, they reference WADA in their advisory statement, but if you go to WADA's thresholds, they talk about that their decision limit where you are decidedly positive and in violation is 180. So I'm not sure why the ABC went with the lower number, but my recommendation would be to go with the 180.
Okay, thank you. And you'd like a motion and all of that good stuff.
Please.
Commissioner Pennington, are you open to crafting a motion?
I certainly am. I would like to ask Ms. Wagner whether we can go ahead and do this today, or do we have to go through some sort of rulemaking process or policy process?
Commissioner, I'm just looking right now. It doesn't appear, and Francisco, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe the fines are set out in the statute, and they don't appear to be set out specifically in any rules as far as what the fines would be for progressive penalties. And so the commission could certainly move forward today if it wished to do so, as far as setting what the fines would be on progressive violations with consideration of THC, or you could table it and ask for additional information if you weren't absolutely clear or positive on what you wanted to do today.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, if a motion is in order, then I would proceed to make one, if that's okay.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the Medical Advisory Committee recommendations from the ABC, only changing the threshold level of THC to 180 milligrams or nanograms per milliliter, and accepting throughout the rest of that recommendation the 180, but otherwise to approve the progressive fine structure that they've recommended. So basically accept
Thank you.
the advisory committee recommendation, with the change being the THC level at 180.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have a motion. I will second that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries 2-0. Thank you all. Doctor, thank you all. Thank you for your time and help with this. It's going to be tricky. This THC test is going to have some people clear in a week, and some of our heavyweights might take 2 weeks. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting world to live in.
I'm watching Mr.
time.
Lopez shake his head, yes, that some of the heavyweights might.
Well,
Like I told you, the more storage you got, the longer you got it.
There you go. I've seen some guys with storage in the cage now and then. Let's circle back to B, our old business. B1 is our COVID-19 protocols. Mr. Meneses.
Yes, sir. And real quick, Dr. Oda, anything else for him before he's got to jump off in a minute? All right, Dr. Oda.
Thank you so much.
So much.
Thank you all, and I'll get that answer to you, Francisco. I should have it shortly.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
So the other thing, commissioners, I wanted to speak about is the new executive order that Governor Ducey recently signed regarding the occupancy limits that have expired. As you recall, our protocols that we passed in October does have some restrictions to occupancy limits, setting or stating that we will adhere to AZDHS protocols. And at that time, DHS had recommendations based on how the spread was by county, what percentage of occupancy a business should have, whether it be 25, 50, or 75%. With this new EO, it removes the occupancy limits, provided that the sports organization submits their plans for physical distancing and safety measures and gets an approval from either AZDHS or another public health body such as the county or the city health organizations. So I would just also recommend, so I have a couple different recommendations based on our conversation with Dr. Oda. I would recommend the commission ask that we update the current COVID protocols to, one, adhere to the new instructions from the EO from the governor, removing the occupancy limits, provided that promoters get the approval from the required health departments. And two, that as Dr. Oda had informed us, that individuals that have been vaccinated with the Moderna and Pfizer after their second shot, or the Johnson & Johnson with their first, 1 month after their completion of their vaccination, they should be exempt from the testing requirements. As for the antibodies, as Dr. Oda said, I think we still need to do a little more research on that. I don't want us to put a quantitative value on it by kind of guessing, and there seems like there's a big spread. As Dr. Oda said, his value is over 250 and LabCorp setting it at 0.8. So that is a very big spread. And I do think that the commission should do some more research in establishing a satisfactory level that we feel comfortable that the person who has the antibodies is definitely immune. So that's a interesting motion for someone to craft, but those are basically the two changes we want to make to the COVID protocol: is the vaccinations and the EO change.
Well, we have the finest crafter of motions with us today. Commissioner Pennington, are you willing to take a shot at that?
I second Mr. Meneses's motion. Mr. Chairman, I move that we recognize the new executive order from the governor reducing or eliminating the occupancy limits for events, provided that the promoter has acceptable COVID protocols that are approved by either the state or local health department. And secondly, that once a fighter can prove or a participant can prove vaccination at least 1 month prior, complete vaccination at least 1 month prior to the event, that they would be not subject to testing. Did that get it all,
Thank you,
Mr. Manasseh?
Commissioner.
Yeah, Mr. Pennington, I think we do have to make one correction. Not 1 month prior on the vaccination. We need to have it 1 month after they've completed their vaccination cycle.
Well, I was just saying 1 month prior to the event, but one month after. Yeah, 1 month after the vaccination is acceptable as part of that motion.
Okay, and then the other thing I'd ask to add is, Mr. Lopez has an event this weekend. I don't think we can make these changes, nor can he get a good crowd in there at this time. We got to get all this stuff done. So can we make this effective at the end of this month so we can get COVID protocols up to date?
Certainly. So the motion would include
right.
at the end of this month.
Correct.
Now, if
Thank
you get
you,
all of that
Commissioner.
written up, that would be amazing.
We have a motion. I will second that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 2-0. Commissioner, thank you so much for taking a stab at that one. And we press on. Item B2 is our COVID-19 update. Mr. Manasseh.
Yes, sir. So this is just giving you an update of how the COVID numbers are looking as of right now. We continue to see improvements on the AZDHS hospitalizations. Hospitalizations for ICUs are currently showing at 15% availability, which is great because we were down in the single digits for a period, and we are back up over our 10% threshold we established last summer, and we seem to be moving in a good direction there. For inpatient, that has dipped back down to 12, and just a couple days ago it was down to 11. So we are reapproaching that 10% threshold where we had talked about last summer of suspending events once hospitalizations had gotten below that. So that's something we're still watching for and hoping that it continues to improve as the ICU is. And then emergency room continues to have a sufficient amount of availability at over 50% availability at this time. So as we move forward to the event that's taking place this weekend, all the numbers continue to look like they are in a good or a decent position for us to continue to move forward. And that was just an FYI. There was no motion on that.
Okay, yeah, that is, the numbers are certainly encouraging, aren't they? Or maybe it's just that the numbers were so discouraging over the past few months, but it feels like we're headed in the right direction at the very least. Thank you. Commissioner Pennington, any thoughts?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm good.
Okay, good. Let's go to B3. Rough Nation, MMA event update. There's a new location, the Glendale Civic Center, on March 13th, 2021. Mr. Manasseh.
Yes, sir. This is just giving you guys an update. At the last commission meeting, the commission had approved Mr. Joel Lopez of Rough Nation to do an MMA event. The location at the time was going to be at their headquarters in Tempe. This is just giving the commission an update that location has changed. It is going to be at the Glendale Civic Center, which Rough had done an event, a successful event there prior to COVID. And we are still moving forward with a Saturday date this week. It will be televised. They have partnered with One FC, a MMA promoter out of the Asian market, and this will be televised. They had come into this after their approval at the last meeting with about 30 bouts they were trying to put together, and I definitely think they could do it. It would definitely be a task for the commission and for themselves, and that's something I think that could be eventually achieved. However, after talking with fighters and getting all the medical requirements and fee schedules and things like that, we've kind of reduced this down now to around 15 bouts. As of right now, 14 are approved. They're aiming for 12 to 15 being the final number. And like I said, there's 14 approved as of right now. They expect a couple more to be approved and a couple to possibly drop off And we also have to anticipate anyone that comes back with either a true positive COVID test or a false positive. Those test results are going to start coming in today, tomorrow, and Friday. So just giving you guys an update, we are still moving forward. Everything is still looking good. We have the event pretty well staffed, and this will be a no fan event, but pay-per-view televised from Glendale Civic Center with about 12 to 15 bouts.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Meneses. Congratulations, Mr. Lopez. This is exciting. Mr. Meneses, how do I go about buying the pay-per-view? Any ideas? I get on the Rough Nation website?
How do we, can you unmute him? Oh, unmute yourself, Joel. You can answer any questions. There you go.
Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you, commissioners. Yeah, we're really excited. So the site is going to be www.rufmma.net. We have our own pay-per-view platform. Thanks to our amazing technical team that we have, we created our own. We own everything. We saved a lot of money doing that. So we're looking forward to a good year of pay-per-view show. Hopefully, this one goes really well. We're anticipating a good number. We're getting buys from. I get alerts every time someone buys one, so I get to see the country. So far we have like countries like Melbourne, Australia, states like Connecticut, New Hampshire, people that we've never even heard of. So it's getting out there. So pre-sales are steady. I believe that it'll get better after the weigh-ins. I believe a lot of people like to buy last minute, including myself. I'm an impulse buyer, so hopefully the day of we'll have the number that we need to meet in order to be successful. So we're shifting gears. We're shifting gears, adjusting to the COVID protocols, and hopefully our digital platforms are successful and it goes off with a hit. So yeah, we're excited.
Hey, Joel, when we do a recap for the next month's commission meeting, if you could, it would be just helpful. It'd be also interesting to see if you could just kind of give us a list of what countries had purchased your pay-per-view. It'd be just interesting for the commission to see, as a local promoter, how far your reach went and what countries you were able to reach. So if you can kind of just give us a little list, not how many, just a list of each country, so we can just see where you guys were being broadcast. I think the commission would like to see that just as a fun thing to support your win and your success on that. Having a local guy be able to broadcast in Australia and other countries is exciting for the commission.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got a back end that gives us all the analytics we need, from numbers to countries to gender. So it gives us a good breakdown. So we'll definitely use those numbers to analyze where we need to target our next market for our next show. And we're really excited. We're just really excited to really put this show on, like Mr. Meneses alluded to. We had 30 fights, but now, as you know, with the extra, safety precautions, we'll probably end up with 10 to 12 bouts after everything's said and done. On Saturday, we'll probably have about 10 or 12. That's what I'm thinking.
Cool.
Mr.
Joel,
Chairman,
that's fantastic. I have great respect for you, and thank you for helping us lead the charge back into the business. I'm really excited about your event. Commissioner Pennington, you were saying?
Yes, Mr. Lopez, what was that URL again?
The URL is
the website?
Yes, it's www.rufmma.net.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wrote down, so just wanted to check.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Best of luck. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Shall we press on, Mr. Meneses?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That pushes us towards D, call of the public. Those members of the public wishing to address the commission must attend via video conference and either utilize the raise hand function or message the meeting host directly to be recognized by the chair. We ask that you hold comments to 5 minutes. Mr. Meneses, anyone want to talk with us?
Yes, we have Mr. Dennis O'Connell. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on real quick. Dennis, hold on. Joel, did you still have something? You had your hand raised prior. Did you already address it? You're good? Okay, sorry. All right. Yeah, Mr. Dennis O'Connell, former executive director of the commission and a licensed MMA and boxing judge.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. O'Connell.
Good morning, Mr. Commissioners, Executive Director and Carlo. Just after you've watched the rough streaming bouts, make sure you can also watch Arizona's own David Benitez on Showtime on Saturday night at super middleweight.
That's the one in Connecticut, right, Dennis?
That is from the Mohegan Sun. That is correct.
Yeah, he's fighting in Connecticut. David Benavidez. We were hoping to have that bout here last year, but COVID hit us. But they are. Is this for his? Well, he lost that title. He lost it against Angulo, right?
He lost it on scale.
Oh, on the scale. That's right. Okay.
But it's tricky. I haven't been able to determine it, but it is scheduled for 12 rounds. So 12 rounds is a title bout.
Yeah.
For something.
Yeah. I'll have to look and see who's.
However, having said that, you all know in boxing, there are numerous kinds of title. It could be interim, super welterweight, silver, intercontinental, who knows? But it's a 12-rounder. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. So you were well? All is well with you?
I'm proud to announce that I am exactly 1 month and 1 day after my second vaccination. I am good to go.
So that
Awesome.
means you're going into the ring?
Great.
Pardon me?
That means you're ready to step in the ring? Or the cage?
Yes, I will referee.
Dennis is always ready.
Thank you again,
True that.
folks.
All right. Next, we had Mr.
Great to hear your
Bob
voice.
Sorry, we had Mr. Bob Carmel of USMTA. Mr. Bob Carmel. You got to.
Morning, Bob.
I got it. Good morning, everybody. Had a couple of questions concerning COVID protocols and what we just talked about. So as far as audiences go, a promoter would have to get their plans approved by the local, which would be city health departments, or the state. Who's the state?
Arizona Department of Health Services, AZDHS. So it just says a public health department. So it could be the state health department, county health department, or the city.
Okay. All right. And the other thing too is you mentioned reviewing the COVID protocols every 180 days. I think they need to be done every 30 days at every meeting, the way things are moving, because we're holding back everybody's businesses and livelihoods over a year now. So I think the commission should be a little faster on everything. So you guys can take that up what you want. But there's also a bill. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, it's Scott Fletcher. I agree. I think you'll find out if you go to these meetings, it's almost all we talk about every month. So I think we truly are addressing it on a monthly basis. But I agree, 180 days. If we didn't talk about it for the next 6 months, I think we would be fools. So thank you.
Right.
You were saying.
Well, so another issue, and again, I'm just a stupid Thai boxing coach, but there's a bill that's been reviewed in the House that is making business owners not responsible for people who wear masks in their businesses. Should that get passed through the state Senate?
So
will that mean that the Boxing Commission sanctioning body no longer mandate that people wear masks in whatever we're involved in?
Yeah, Bob, I understand you have some you may have some frustrations on that. As a business owner, you can always, set your own, no shirt, no shoes, no service kind of deal. You can set your own policy. And then, the legislature is something that if you want to address changes, that's something that unfortunately we can't do much here with the commission. that is something that you can definitely, though, go lobby with the legislature to talk about your concerns with those kind of bills, and then how they impact your business. But unfortunately, that's not something the commission can push on.
Well, it would seem to me if that bill gets passed, we are all citizens. So Joel's show next week, if someone comes in there and doesn't want to wear a mask, Joel's not responsible for making that person wear a mask. And the commission is not able to force Joel to make people wear masks.
Yeah, I understand your frustrations.
I mean, you guys are all state guys. You're all, if that,
No,
I'm not frustrated. I'm not frustrated, but if as a sanctioning body, I'm going to have to say, look, the 5 people who are allowed to watch this show have to wear a mask, and the promoter comes to me and says, well, they just passed an ordinance or a state law saying that you can't force people to wear a mask. Where do I stand? Where do you stand? Where does the state stand? What are you going to do at Joel's show when the state says you can do whatever you want to do? It's up.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anything else? Anything else, Bob? I mean, I don't know. Can't really get too much into it. I mean, it's not something. It's out of our hands, Bob. It's the legislature. It has nothing to do with the. That's not that I have anything to do with, but the legislature is a different entity than the commission, and that's not something we communicate with them to affect in that way. That's something as a private business owner you could go lobby and talk to them, but it's kind of out of our hands at this point.
Well, isn't the state as a boxing commission, when they oversee a show, like the employer? You guys say what goes, what doesn't go. If the state legislature says if you wear a mask, it's your own choice, does the state boxing commission have the right to make everybody wear a mask because it's still in your older protocols?
Yeah, so we look at our policies and our procedures, and we're a regulatory body that can only uphold what was within our purview, and so we would enforce anything that falls under our rules and our regulations. At this time, that is something that, as you mentioned, is going under for consideration. We have no further opinion on it, Bob. I'm sorry, but we only are able to address what is within our rules and our procedures.
Executive Director Meneses, this is Kelly Wagner. I would just caution the commission and you as the executive director from having further discussions about speculative things. It's not before the commission to make a decision. So if there's something that individuals of the public would ask the commission to put on a future agenda, that they can certainly do that. But at this point, I think the conversation is probably getting into territory that the commission shouldn't be considering.
Understood and agreed.
Okay, well, we can hit it when it happens. All right, that's all I had. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you, Ms. Wagner.
All right, Mr. Jason Martinez.
Hello, everybody.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking. Good morning, commissioners, director, everybody here today. I am elated to hear that the commission is considering changing the COVID protocols. I can tell you, as a matchmaker trying to put on a pro-am nationwide event for the first time in a pandemic in probably the most highly regulated state in the nation, has been a Herculean challenge. And one of the things that has happened, and feedback that I've received from several people, is that it is so logistically and cost prohibitive that people who are going to make it through our show this weekend, who are from out of state, have already told me they will not come back to Arizona until the COVID protocols change or the state commission changes the testing regulations. I've heard this numerous times. I've had people drop out of our event because of the COVID protocol, because of the cost to us and them as competitors. We have many people, you know, who are not rich in this game, amateurs and pros alike, who depend on every dollar. And so to request hundreds of dollars of COVID testing for their corners and themselves, and the 24-hour turnaround time causes them extra travel days, extra hotel stays, extra inconveniences. And we've had several people bail on this card because of the COVID protocol only. And so I'm glad to hear that the commission is willing to entertain changing it. I would, as Mr. Carmel stated, I would recommend a shorter window on the review of the protocol, because conditions, developments, and testing change so rapidly. The conditions at the hospitals change so rapidly that I do think it's worth having it be a standing agenda item on every commission meeting to see what the current trends are, current technologies, current issues, etc., and that it be revisited on a monthly basis. I also would recommend, after going through the regular COVID test protocols, not only with the turnaround time and cost, that the commission entertain rapid testing. There are many forms out that are above 90% accurate now in the time that we've been having these discussions. And so I would hope that the commission would also entertain rapid testing at weigh-ins, and maybe double rapid testing at weigh-ins and then day of fight. That would prevent so many financial, logistical, travel issues for out-of-state fighters, for out-of-town fighters. It would still allow them to compete. It would still make it affordable for them and the promoter, and it would prevent people not being able to compete simply because they couldn't afford to. And that's really not what this sport is about. This sport is about the underdog, the working class guy. So we don't want to lose those people in the sport. And so we're hoping that the commission, as they entertain changing the protocols, also entertains the idea of rapid testing at weigh-in and or day of. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought that was well said. I agree with much of it. At some point, Francisco, I would like to talk about making our protocols a monthly agenda item. I think we need to continue to move as we emerge, hopefully. It seems like every month the playing surface is different, and I think we need to keep talking about it and taking into account what we're asking of promoters and fighters, etc. So thank you. I appreciate your thoughts.
All right. Anyone else?
Carvajal.
Oh,
I believe it's
Josephine Carvajal.
Hello, everybody. Francisco, I just want to know if you're in our event requests for April 24th.
Yep, I sent you a message. I'll when I go to the call to the commission, I'll bring it up.
Okay, thank you.
And we have
Lance Spade?
Yeah, sorry, it's spouty, but I just wanted to thank the commission for everything that you guys have done, reviewing it. A little bit of my background: I work for Iridium Sports. We're a management company that works with a number of athletes, both in Arizona and the Southwest region. I really applaud the commission. I've been following along, listening to your guys' meetings, following your protocols, and I really do appreciate the efforts that you guys are making to get back to competition and get back to events in a safe manner. I just would like to reiterate what Jason had said on the fact that some of the protocols make it prohibitively difficult, both from a cost standpoint, but also from a logistical standpoint, for a lot of these athletes to travel to Arizona and compete. Both representing athletes within Arizona and outside of the state, I know how difficult it is for in-state Arizona fighters to fight other in-state Arizona fighters. And for the health of the Arizona combat sports community itself, I think bringing in out-of-state athletes is vitally important. So again, I would just like to reiterate what Jason said, that the commission take into consideration changes in the current environment and maybe take some steps to make it a little easier for out-of-state athletes to compete in Arizona events. As I know currently, aside from the states that aren't doing any events at all, Arizona is the only state that requires a COVID PCR test prior to travel to another state to compete in the state. I understand the initial adoption of that restriction or of that requirement, but as it stands right now, there are no other restrictions on traveling to Arizona. So putting an additional restriction on athletes coming into the state, it just makes it very difficult, especially with the 72-hour turnaround prior to travel, especially when these guys are generally leaving on a Wednesday or a Thursday. It's just a very tight timeline. So again, I want to say I appreciate everything the commission has done. I'm looking forward to this event this weekend with Ruff. I'm looking forward to future events. I just would like you guys to consider adjusting the protocol as the environment changes.
Cool. And
Thank
it looks
you.
like
I appreciate
that was it for the call to the public.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you. Item E is the call to the commission. Commission members or the executive director may introduce a summary of current events, ask questions, and or make comments. Gentlemen, thoughts? Commissioner Pennington.
Mr. Chairman, there is an issue that we're going to be facing before very long, if not already. And that issue is transgender males competing as females against females, and vice versa. I guess a transgender female competing against a male if they've trans to male. That I think is going to be an issue that we need to address. And I request that we start being prepared for that, start doing our research and whatever else we need to do to be prepared.
And Mr. Pennington,
Commissioner,
if I just may, yeah. So I've started doing some research on it. There is definitely some legislative changes taking place regarding transgender athletes in like high school sports here in Arizona. And there's also some guidance from other commissions regarding transgender athletes in combative sports. I've also looked at our own rules, and we have a rule also not necessarily already addressing transgender athletes, but I think the way our rule is written, it can be applied in a fair, consistent way with the industry standards. But that is still something that I am still gathering more research, and I will pass along maybe for a future agenda item to really kind of delve into and make some more information available.
Thank you, Mr. Meneses.
Mr. Meneses, do you know if the ABC has done anything along these lines in this topic?
I haven't seen anything from the ABC itself. I know the ARP, the Association of Ringside Physicians, has some guidance on it. And I've talked to some other commissions as well. What it's going to come down to is having to establish, kind of like we were talking about the COVID test, a threshold of looking at someone's testosterone levels and estrogen levels, and that would be if they exceed one or the other, that's what would give us the the confirmation of the transgender athlete's current gender role and how that would play into the sports.
Okay, thank you. If I may, I'd also like to add to the next agenda just that we discuss the COVID-19 protocols. I want to make sure that we're not so stringent that we are discouraging events. I, of course, want to be safe with this thing, but I think it's time to kick the tires again and make sure we're not, too careful, if you will. I don't know what the right answer is, but I think we need to take a hard look at it.
Sure, and I have a couple things to talk about in this this area, and one of them was the COVID protocols and how often we look at them. Yeah, I get that 180 days may seem like a lot, but I also think that 30 days is not enough time because of the information that changes. If every 30 days we're going back and changing and the next information comes and we're reverting back or whatever else, that can also be very time consuming and also be problematic as well. So I do think it should be on the agenda to reevaluate and see if there's anything that's substantive that needs to be changed each time. That's fine to continue to put this on each month. But I would recommend the commission carefully consider not making changes so frequently that it makes it difficult to have an actual established procedures because in each month they're changing and we got to alert everyone and it's a new requirement this time and a new test. So I just think that we should not make substantive changes so frequently, but definitely consider and look at what's out there and what new information is available. And we also need to make sure that we have our ringside physician available to give us some guidance as to those changes. And having him at every monthly meeting, I don't know his availability yet, so we'd have to work on that as well. So definitely think there's some things that change. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I agree completely. I think it's time we take a look at it now that the numbers are looking better, but I'm not pressing for it to be part of every monthly meeting. Just when it seems like we should at least kick the tires, I think next month would be a good time to do so. Sure.
And then like Mr. Lance had said, and I had gotten a message from Dr. Oda while we were speaking, Dr. Oda had actually said that looking at these different tests, the commission would need to also consider what the community spread is each month. So as the prevalence of COVID goes up in the community, then what Dr. Oda is saying that you would want those more accurate tests, such as the tests that we currently have in place, as the numbers are going up and there's more substantial spread because you have more potential of having asymptomatic people that could be in our areas and around people. And as the community spread goes down, then you could open it up to looking at some of the rapid tests that Jason had alluded to, like the rapid antigen tests and things like that. So that's also something that Dr. Oda is now saying that you'd have to consider is constantly keeping track of that and going back and forth between the tests depending on where we're at. So that's something that as you're looking at it either monthly or by every other month, that the commission can make a determination that we are back to these tests or we have to stay at the more stringent because of where we are. So there's a lot of things to consider with this. And I know that, athletes and promoters and sports managers and everyone gets frustrated that there's different protocols. But we have to make sure that the event is safe, not only for the athletes that are competing as much as possible, all of our officials that are there. And then once we start having spectating fans in the audience too, we have a responsibility there as well. So we have to consider all the different data that's out there and available and make the best determination. And sometimes it does create some additional hurdles that are difficult, but it is what our job is to ensure the health and safety of these events. And so we have to do so with that in mind. So with that said, Dr. Oda had also messaged to answer Mr. Pennington's question. The THC test is a metabolite test. So it is testing for the metabolites of the THC active ingredient in the cannabis plant. The next thing I had, Sweet Science has submitted their event request to do an event on April 24th, a boxing event here in Phoenix. Details are still coming, but I've given them a verbal approval to go ahead and start moving forward. And their event request and their completed COVID protocols will be before the commission at the next scheduled meeting. And the last thing I have is I have already talked to the commissioners, and some of the people on this call are also already aware. It's already gotten out, my understanding, to more people. But next Friday will be my last day with the commission. I have decided to step back from the commission and deal with a personal family matter and focus my time and my resources on that for the time being. Don't know that my departure will be permanent. It may or may not be. And I will reevaluate what I intend to do and whether I have an opportunity to come back to the commission or I work with the commission in another capacity after I am available and ready to do so. So I appreciate the support that I received from the commissioners. I appreciate the support that I received from our officials. I've had the opportunity in this position to travel to some other commissions in other states and work with their commissions and observe their commissions. And I really am proud of our commission. I think once you're able to travel to some other commissions and watch operations and see things, we do have a really great commission here. We have some really great officials. We have an amazing talent pool here in Arizona for both MMA and boxing, and promoters too. We have very hungry promoters. They are willing to get out there and promote these sports and push these sports, push athletes to their limits in a health and safety way. But to help grow the sport, to help advance the sport. And it's people like Mr. Lopez and Jason Martinez and Iron Boy and Sweet Science and all of our other promoters that come, not only from our small ones, our larger ones as well, but a lot of people don't understand how much work that the smaller promotions really have to go through and how much struggles they go through and how much expenses they have to go through in order to put on a successful show. And they do so sometimes begrudgingly, but we work through it and we put on a good quality event. And I really do feel fortunate to have led this commission for the last several years. And I thank you guys all for your support. And I look forward to seeing you guys at another time in hopefully either this capacity or another. So thank you.
Francisco, thank you so much for your time and efforts. You have you've been firm when you need to be firm, and you've been helpful when you need to be helpful. And I don't think you could have done a better job. You will be sorely missed. But thank you for all your efforts. I think this is a great commission in large part to your direction and oversight. So I thank you.
Thank you.
And I certainly support Chairman Fletcher's comments.
And Mr. Chairman, this is Director Vogt. May I be heard?
Please.
I also just want to thank Francisco for his great service to the department and to this commission. I think, just watching how efficiently this commission operates, how well you guys have navigated what's been a very challenging year, and, the run-up, all the success we had to the run-up to this, and, we're getting back into it. Just really want to thank Francisco for his leadership, his hard work, and he definitely will be missed. So on behalf of the department, Francisco, thank you, and we wish you all the best in the next phase.
Thanks so much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Director. Let's press on. F is the announcement that the next regularly scheduled commission meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, April 14th, 2021, and is subject to change based on a quorum. And item G is the specter of a possible adjournment, which would require a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
We have a motion. I will second that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 2-0. We are officially adjourned. Thank you all for a really interesting meeting, I think, and some great thoughts. We're headed in the right direction. Everybody be safe and take care.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. The end time is 11:24 a.m. Have a good day.